Hello, everyone. We are back with the bootcamp session for the AWS. Today, we are going to cover AWS AppSync, which is now becoming more and more important in case of a GraphQL. So, Waris, can you please explain us what is AppSync and how we can benefit from it?
Yeah, sure. So basically, today we are going to learn how to use GraphQL with AWS, and we have been using GraphQL quite extensively in the past few projects. So basically, I'll just give you a quick revision. So basically, the problem with REST APIs is that they do not have a very well-defined data structure, and therefore we see a lot of overfetching and underfetching in them. So by overfetching, I mean that sometimes you get a lot more data than you actually need, and then you have to apply some kind of post-fetch filtering or data processing. And underfetching means sometimes you get less data than you actually need, and in that case, you actually have to run another REST API and get extra data from another API. So obviously, REST APIs are not very efficient, and they require a lot of post fetch filtering. So and also another problem with REST API is that you do not know the data structure of the response in advance. You have to run the API and then see it for yourself. So these problems were solved by GraphQL. So GraphQL has a very well-defined data structure, and it has a very well-defined schema. So you can actually write the data. You can actually mention the data or describe the data that you want in the request, and the GraphQL returns you exactly what you asked for, nothing more, nothing less. So it's very, very efficient, and you only have one endpoint in GraphQL, unlike REST APIs. And you also know the data structure of the response beforehand because of the well-defined schema. So the service in AWS that implements GraphQL is called AppSync. And so AppSync is mostly GraphQL, but it also has some more. It also has some added functionality, like you can add authorization and security on your GraphQL APIs. So there are like 3 or 4 different kinds of authorizations, which I think I'll go into the detail later. So and another feature is data sources. So you can actually connect your AppSync with a data source, and there are like 3 main kinds of data sources. The first one is Lambda functions. The second one is DynamoDB, which are your databases. The third one is HTTP endpoint. So today we are only going to be learning about Lambda function as a data source, and we'll cover the rest of the data sources in the upcoming lectures. So yeah.
Okay, so can't we use GraphQL without AppSync, even on AWS functions, serverless functions?
I think you can, but you'll have to use them inside a Lambda function.
Yeah, so basically what students need to understand is what AWS did is AWS created a service named AppSync to streamline, to smooth, or to what you say, ease for developers and for us, so that we can use GraphQL with our any service. Either we want to use with the functions, like serverless function with database or HTTP endpoints. If we are as we have seen in our past project, we were doing GraphQL with Netlify. So what we had to do is we inside our Netlify function or our Lambda function, we had to create Apollo server for our to manage our GraphQL queries. Then we need to create the resolvers, and those resolvers were going to respond to our GraphQL query. So in that case, we have to manage everything by ourselves. What AWS did is AWS created a service. Now this is interesting because GraphQL is a pattern or a style of querying to a server. AWS completely adopted it. It is from the Facebook. AWS completely adopted it and given you an interface or a service for GraphQL, which is quite different in itself, because now you don't need to add any resolver or any code inside your Lambda function. You will create a service between them, and that service will be a GraphQL service, and that service will be talking to your function and responding to your server. So that's the very big benefit, and we need to see how we were doing previously and how we are doing in with the AppSync. Do you want to add anything, or we should move for the coding?
Yeah, I think we should go for the coding. Yeah.
Okay, so let me share my screen first. Okay. So today we are going to cover the step number 03, and if we will have time, then we'll go for the step 04. So let's see what's inside step 03. So our main focus is we need to learn how AppSync works. And as Waris told us that you can connect your AppSync or definitely your GraphQL with multiple data sources. Means you can connect with the functions, or you can connect with the DynamoDB, or you can connect with the HTTP points. That's what the benefit of GraphQL, and AppSync has combined all this together, and you can do with the AppSync APIs. So we'll see how you can. So that's we have the few links over here. The project you can see. So first of all, what is AppSync? And we'll see AppSync docs. And there is an article by which going through this article, you can explore example how you should work with the AppSync. I'll come later for this information. Okay, so AppSync is a fully managed service that makes easy to develop GraphQL APIs by handling. Now, the important thing, as Waris also mentioned, that you can also apply security and authorization. So you can apply authorization at the AppSync level, and your function will just handled by the AppSync. So all the queries will pass through AppSync, so you can apply securities and everything over there. In case of the style we were working previously with the Netlify, we have created Apollo server by ourselves. So in for the security and all the checks we need to implement for by ourselves. So we AWS did all this for us. Okay, and as we are doing this with CDK, so we'll be learning its library, API references, everything. So once you go to these two links, it will give you AppSync basic information and the AppSync doc. This doc you should learn and try to absorb everything from this doc. There are many details which you can explore, and then you will learn AppSync. As we are moving more and more towards calling APIs using GraphQL instead of REST API, because of the benefit, as Waris mentioned, you will not be under data, or you will not be over data. So you will not be getting data which you don't need, and if you require a data which is more than, so your single query can handle all the data, and single query will return you all the data. So for that, you must learn in detail this article, this complete description of documentation. This talk will explain you how you can install and everything. So what I'm going to do is, let me set up the first project, and then okay, directory CDK net app dash. That's something you need to do every time you create a CDK application. And what you can do is, as we have created example in this project as well, so you can explore example by looking at this example, and you can learn. Let me open my AWS account as well. Okay, it's done. Cool. Okay, now, so for the very first thing, what we need to do is we need to see how we can initiate the AppSync. So what we want to do is we want to create a GraphQL query so that we can connect to our Lambda function, and then we receive function from the Lambda by using GraphQL. So that's what our target is, and for that we are using AWS AppSync. Okay. You can hear me clearly, right? Why AWS is not working? You can hear me clearly?
Not exactly. I can hear you in bits and pieces.
Just a moment.
No, I think it's my net. It's not yours.
Okay. No, the AWS page was not working, so I thought my internet is. I thought today is my day for the internet break. Okay, so AWS should be working. Okay, so let's see what we have here. I guess now it's working. Yes. Okay, so it's working now, and what you can do is either explore this example, and we have the code over here inside this file. You can see that how you are going to initiate your first async AppSync GraphQL API, or as I mentioned, you have this example over here, which you can use to, that's one. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to create a GraphQL API. As we have learned that whatever function we will create, that function will require request. So normally we request as a REST API. Now we are going to request from the GraphQL. So for GraphQL, we need to create an schema. For GraphQL, we need to create GraphQL API. So as we are using AppSync, so we need to use CDK's AppSync construct, which is AppSync GraphQL API. And you can explore this here as well. CDK AppSync API. Okay, so that's, as you can see, you need to create a schema. Let's say it says create type, it's a type, then query. So we have learned this in detail in previously. If you want to add an input in the mutation, so we need to create like this. Then we can call the AppSync API, then provide authorization with IAM or enable X-ray for the debugging in detail. So that's the basic construct which you can use for creating an API. So I'll pick from here, or either from anywhere you can pick it. And then I'll paste it over here. But the problem is we have not installed the AppSync. So we need to install AppSync as well. Meanwhile, it's installing. Let me explain you that what we are saying. We are saying new AppSync dot create GraphQL. Again, the all the construct require current context name. So we are naming it API. Then it requires the properties. So whatever properties you need to provide specific to that particular construct. In our case, the name. So let me say blog AppSync API new, and we need to provide schema. So in this GraphQL construct, we need to provide the schema that this is the schema which will be used for the GraphQL query. Again, appsync.schema.from asset, as I have previously mentioned in our last class, that whatever the content we need to use, so we need to upload it from asset. In case of all these CDKs, whenever you provide the S3 data or websites, so you load it as a from asset. So appsync.schema.asset, then you providing the configuration authorization. So what type of authorization you are using? So at this moment, we will be using API key, so that it will generate a API key, and we can, from the client, we can call this API using API key. So it is installed. Let me AppSync from AWS AppSync. Okay. So that's the construct we have created. That's a basic GraphQL API. And then let me create a schema so that we can use it. So what I'll do is create a folder, name GraphQL, and inside there we need to have a schema file which can have an extension of .graphql or .gql, anything. Both will work. So if I'll say schema.gql, it will also work. And let me just rename it. I'll call it schema.gql. And as we have learned previously with the GraphQL, so we need to create, at this moment, I'm creating very simple query, type query, and it will be some message. So let's say welcome, and it will return a string. So that's the basic query. I'll add things into it later. So that's our schema. It will be loaded with this. Now what we need is we need a Lambda function, so that that function will serve the purpose. For that, I'll create a folder Lambda. Inside that, we need to create a file. Let me call it welcome.ts. Okay. Now here we need a function. So let me call exports.handler to. We need a parameter as well, but at this moment, I'll show you the simplest way, and then I'll add things into it. Okay, and what it will do is it needs to be sync. And it will return welcome or hello world from AppSync Lambda. So we have created a basic Lambda, we have created very basic schema, we have created this GraphQL. Now what we need to do is we need to create another construct that will run the Lambda function, that will create the Lambda function. So for that, I'll better copy it for the. So as there are many things, so I don't need everything. I'll remove it. Okay, so Lambda. Now we need an AWS Lambda to install npm. Okay, so Lambda is also installed. So what we are calling it Lambda function, a context, whatever context, my function, name it anything, and either call it lambda.asset code to keep it in sync how we were doing previously. I'll make it lambda dot code dot from asset, and asset is a lambda, and it's the static function, so we don't need lambda new keyword. And handler, our file name is welcome, so we call it welcome dot handler is our function, which is this one. So we are done with the Lambda function. Now what we need to do is we need to connect our GraphQL API with our Lambda function. So for that, what we need to do is to API dot add Lambda data source. It requires ID, so whatever ID you want to provide it, like the name, and then the Lambda function. So let's say I'm calling it okay. First Lambda data source and the function my Lambda. So it will create a data source like this, and now we need to call Lambda data source dot create resolver. If once I'll write this down, I need to show you how we were doing it previously, because the important thing we need to learn is GraphQL has a style how you need to implement that GraphQL. With working with the AppSync, there are a few differences, so we need to understand how it is working. So for this case, let's say I'm creating a resolver, and it requires type name. So my type is query. So I'm calling a query, and field name. That means which query you need to call. In our case, in the schema, we need to call this welcome. So that's how we are specifying that I want to, as we have learned, there are three types of queries in GraphQL: a query which access the data, mutation which can update the data, and the subscription. So for the real-time calling. So at this moment, we want to create a resolver. That's the resolver we have created. And once it is done, what we need to do is we need to see the URL. If we don't output the URL, it will be available in AppSync interface, but we can output from here as well. So new CNF output cdk.cnf output and value colon, we need API dot GraphQL URL that will return us an endpoint. I'm stuck with this as well. It's not a prop. This is provided. In a console, this ID and the prop. Okay. So we also need an ID. Okay, so let's say graph URL, and we also need a key. So what I'll name it as GraphQL API key, and it will return from here API key. The value of output can include. Okay, so what's saying? Okay, that can be an empty URL. So what we can do is can say if the URL is available, then key is available, then return it. Otherwise, empty, because key is optional. If as we are working, we are saying we are working with the API key. If we are working with the authorization as an IAM user, then API key will be null. So it will give us an error. That's why it was giving the error. Okay. So at this point, we have created a GraphQL AppSync object which generated the API. We have created the Lambda function construct, and then we connected both. So for GraphQL API, we said we are using Lambda as a data source. And then on this data source, we are creating a resolver. Once I'll run this, hopefully without an error. So it will give us an URL, and then on that URL, we can call the uh, GraphQL query. But before that, what I need to show you that what is happening around. For that, we need to see you might have all of you have explored our learned from our Gemstick serverless AP repository, and in that we have explained or created the examples related to how you can access or create GraphQL constructs. So for that you need to learn. So I have cloned this project as we are working always on. So in that case, the step number, you can explore step number 22. So I'm explaining you how we were doing with normally, how you will be doing GraphQL with normal application without AppSync. Let's say that's my function, Lambda function. That's our Lambda function. So for Lambda function, what we are doing is we are creating a schema. That's the exactly schema we are creating here in our case. At this moment, this is a simple query. We can add all other queries over here and types over here. So that will match to this schema. Then what we were doing, we were creating a resolver, and inside the resolver, we were implementing the query. So for each, let's say we have a two query, message and user. So for first query message, there is a function. For user, there is a function. In our case, there is no any such thing at this moment, but I'll show you in a moment. But we'll be not creating the separate resolvers inside the Lambda. And then we have initiated the Apollo server and provide the type definition resolver, and then the Apollo server is ready. And from the client, you can call the Apollo server. So in case of client, what we were doing, we were calling this query using query. That's the part we might come in our next class, but that's what at the simplest level, we were creating inside the Lambda function a definition, resolver, and then starting the Apollo server. In case of AppSync, what we have to do is we have to initiate AppSync API, GraphQL API, our Lambda function, and we are connecting both through construct. Instead of writing the resolver here, will not be writing is resolvers here. What we are doing is we are saying there is a resolver, and we are saying it should be a query, and it should be with the name of welcome. So it will go towards the function, and at this moment we are not checking anything, it will just work and runs. So let me start this npm run build. CDK deploy. So AppSync is a service on AWS, so it will have a it will create a formation, cloud formation. It will have a AppSync. So there will be a app inside AppSync, and there will be a Lambda function. Partition. Which folder I'm in? Okay.
Sir, while this is loading, can I just explain how does AppSync works with the data sources?
Yes, please.
So what happens is that so when you connect an AppSync to a data source, and when you run a request, when you send a request to the AppSync, that request gets redirected to the data source. Like for instance, in this example, we have Lambda function as a data source. So the request would be redirected to the Lambda function, and the Lambda function would have access to the entire request, all the inputs, all the arguments, and then Lambda function would do some processing, and then it would return something. So whatever Lambda function would return would map onto the response of the AppSync. So it is very important to properly map the return value of the Lambda function with the expected output of the AppSync.
So you're talking about this one. So at this moment we are returning a string. So our Lambda function is returning a string.
Yeah.
In our schema, we are saying there should be a query type welcome.
Yeah.
But at this moment inside our file there is nothing. I'll show you in a moment. And it should return a string. So our function should handle welcome resolver somehow, which will we do in a moment, and then it should return a string. So at this moment it's not identifying what type of query it is, but it must be returning a string at this moment. I will see in a moment. Okay, so now you can see we have API key, and we have a URL, a GraphQL URL, as we have seen previously while working with the GraphQL, that you can have a URL of your server, and then /GraphQL will show you the GraphQL interface. So you can access this URL, but definitely it will not show anything because it's a protected URL. Unauthorized exception. So you are not authorized to call this. Now let's go to our cloud formation, which is not needed at this moment, but AppSync and Lambda function. So our cloud formation has created a stack which requires few resources, and which include AppSync as well, AppSync schema, AppSync resolver, everything. Now let's go to that's the AppSync interface. We have created an API called CDK AppSync API new. That's what we have here. And once I click on it, it will show us a complete interface, how you can connect with the client. At this moment, we are not talking about how we'll connect to the client. It gives us few examples. Then it will show us schema, which we have created here. This is schema. And data sources, what data sources? So we have connected with a Lambda function. So it's showing a Lambda function here as well. And it's being loaded here. So I'll show you over there as well. Functions, it's a GraphQL function, direct functions, which are not at this moment queries. Now that's very interesting part of this AppSync, that it will give you the query interface and you can play around and create a query, and then you can see if your Lambda function or your GraphQL is working or not. So let's say if I'll click on it, I can see as we have learned with the when we were working with the GraphQL, so it has given us an explorer. So we'll show it a two-way, because at this moment it will not show you how you can call it from your client in your browser application or your mobile application, how you will be calling it. So we need to learn how this will be done. But on the face of it, you have this explorer. Whatever query you have created, you can run it. Let me call this, and it returns welcome from AppSync Lambda. So what it does is, whenever I call this query, it went to the cloud function, Lambda function, and that Lambda function has this particular code, and it's quite simple. But it was I have cut through all the complexities and just create a simple function. Now I'll add few things so that you can understand how things will going to work. But the interesting part is you can have this function, this GraphQL working is directly, and you can call the queries. Now what I'm going to do is
Sir, can you slightly zoom in? People can't are not being able to see.
this one.
Yeah. Can we zoom in on the code? Yeah. No, the code, the visual code.
Okay, so
Yeah.
okay. So now what we need to understand is I can create other queries as well. Let's say hello, it will also return a string. So at this moment, now we have a two queries, two type of queries. So customer can or user can call two type of queries. So we have created one query for welcome. Now we have to create another resolver for hello. The problem is our function does not differentiate between them. It does not have a capability. So as I have showed you the previously, what we had to do is we have to create two resolver, and in that resolver we were managing it. Now what we need to do is we need to differentiate from here. So for that, we need to handle event here. So we can name it, we need to create a type because we are working with the TypeScript. So type AppSync event, and then we'll create that's the specific type of properties we receive whenever we call the GraphQL query from AppSync. So these specific properties in this way they receive to us field name. Okay. Now, when we go to the mutation, we will have another property called arguments. So I'll create this after when I'll show you the mutation. So at this moment, just stick to it, and then this event should be type of AppSync event. Now what we can do is we can specify if event.info.field name equals to welcome, then do something. Let's say welcome as in lambda, else if event.info.field name, and field name you can easily map now, as we have done a bit of work. So you can see this is the field name. So that means we'll receive welcome, or we will either receive hello. That's why it is called field name. If we receive hello, Then we'll return the hello world from AppSync lambda. Else, I'll say not found. So we can throw some errors, but at this moment, to keep it streamlined and smooth. Now you can see what we are going to do is we are not creating a specific resolver inside our lambda function. Previously, as I have showed you in this example, we had to create resolvers and we have to create a server in a different style to create Apollo server. We can do that, but with AWS AppSync, you do not have to worry about this. So your function, lambda function, will remain the simple function which can handle different based on different properties. Whatever type of functionality you want to handle inside the function. So now my function requires a field name. Either it's a welcome, then it will return as a welcome. Either it's a hello, then it will return a hello. Schema, it will remain the same. I have added one more resolver so that there can be two resolvers, and everything else will remains the same. Let me okay. So while it is being deploying, I guess it will ask for the permission. Then I'll go to show you something. It's not asking for the permission. So we have seen this one interface, which AppSync has provided to play with the queries. What you can do is you can use Postman to play with your GraphQL queries, and it will be similar to how you will be calling from your web application or your mobile application. So that will be easy to understand, but this interface will give you everything and you can do all the query management from here. But Postman also gives us this feature. Okay, and if any one of you using the Postman as a Chrome extension, so it is being deprecated, extension will be removed, so you need to install a separate Postman application, because this new Postman application has functionality to handle GraphQL as well. So you can learn how you can handle the GraphQL instructions from the Postman. It will show you how you can handle. So as you can see, there is a GraphQL option now in Postman as well. So the normal extension, browser extension will not work. You need a latest Postman. So I have installed this latest Postman on my machine. We need to provide URL from here, and then I'll show you, once the deployment is done, I'll show you how you can do with this Postman as well. Okay, so it is deployed now. Let's go and to the interface, refresh it. Also refresh the lambda function. Okay, now you can see we have two queries. Hello and welcome. When I click the welcome and execute the query, it will respond with the welcome to AppSync lambda. If I'll go for the hello and skip the welcome, it will return hello world from AppSync. So our lambda function is working, our GraphQL is working, and they are connecting together. We can use both, so it will respond like this. So that's how you can see from here. And as we have received this URL in command prompt, or as well as what you can do is you can review this URL from here as well. I guess it's here, or
It's in the settings.
okay, yes, thank you. Okay, in settings you can have this GraphQL endpoint URL. You can have a app API ID and you have API key, both. All three things are available. We're not using the API ID, but we need URL and the API key. So either you output, because I have call this output here, that's why it's printing on the console. Otherwise you can call it from find it from here. It's available here. Go to the Postman, paste the URL. Definitely it's a GraphQL query, so it will not be a get, it will be a post. If I'll send the request, it will give me again unauthorization exception. So what we need to do is we need to add two headers, API key, your API key, and then content type as an application / GraphQL. So but I missed one more thing. In the body, I need to select a GraphQL. So that's how Postman has also upgraded itself to handle the GraphQL from client side as well. So again, we'll receive the same error. Inside the header, I need to provide this API key. And content type application / JSON. Application / GraphQL, not JSON. Okay, so key will be available in here, or we have outputted on the terminal as well. So done with that, go for the body and click the send. It will give invalid request. I guess it will not zoom out. Zooming is not working over here, but you need to see it says message says invalid request, query can't be empty. So you need to create a query. And then you need to mention, let's say we are talking about the welcome. And once I run it, now you can see we have a data welcome from AppSync Lambda. So if you create a GraphQL query with the AppSync, and then it has a Lambda function at the back of it, when you want to call it from the client, you will call this query. Let's say we are working with the Gatsby application. We have our client is in Gatsby or React or Angular or anything. So we'll call the fetch Axios, or the fetch normal fetch will provide the URL, and then in the header will provide our API key and this content type. So that means it will secure our application based on API key, and we can change the API key so all the requests can be handled this way. So that's how you can call it. Let me mention hello, so it will work as well. So you can call your APIs from this Postman, or you can use this interface which AppSync itself provided to us. Yes, this one. And in the queries, you can call from here. Now what we need to do is, as a last thing, is how we can handle mutations. So important thing is we have many things to learn with AppSync, but at the basic level, what you need to understand, it's a service created by the AWS specifically to create a GraphQL queries, and you can have anything at the backend. your Lambda function, DynamoDB, or any HTTP endpoint. So it will ease out for you. So you do not have to handle creating a Apollo server or everything and then managing all these things by yourself. You can initiate the AppSync service and ask AppSync service to connect with those services, and it will be easy for you. Okay, so for mutation, okay, now let's say I need a mutation, so I'll call, again we are creating an schema, so I'll call mutation and I'll say add user, add product, or anything just which will update something on server. At this moment we do not have a database which will be learned with the DynamoDB, but at this moment we do not have a server, so a database, so we'll just return something from the server. So let's say add product. It needs an input. Now input can be managed two ways, because I need to show you nested query or a nested type, so I'll use the input as an object. Let's say create a product. Otherwise what we can do is we can say id string and name string, so that will be easy. But what I'm trying to do is product input, so it will be something as input, so I'll call it type. No, as whatever you need to pass as an input in mutation, so you want to mention it as input product input, and I'll name it, I have its few properties, so name, string, price, int. We are talking about the GraphQL schema. So for GraphQL schema, we have a numerical type as an int. In TypeScript, we have a numerical type as number, which is JavaScript. Okay. And what it will return at this moment, I'll say we'll return a string, but we can also return an object from here as well. I'll show you in a second step. So that's what we have created the mutation. Now what we need to do is inside our stack, we'll add, again we'll be creating another resolver, and we'll name, instead of query, we'll name it mutation, and the field name will be add product. That's it for our stack, and that's it for a schema. Now at this function level, again, now we have a simplest thing to do. If event.info.fieldName equals add product, and do something. I forgot to show you the logs. I'll show you logs in a while as well. Console. Now we are expecting something from the client. So client will be sending an object which should have a two properties, name and price. So we are expecting this. So in our server Lambda function, what we need to do is we need to handle that object as well. So for that, as I showed you, we need to call it argument, and we'll name it product. So we are expecting something, not product project, it's a product. And again, because we are working with TypeScript, we need to specify the type. So I'm saying it's a product, but there is no such thing as product, so I need to specify the type product, and then type should have a name, string, price as number. Now we are in TypeScript, so we need to, so data types in TypeScript start says as a number. So that's how we mentioned over here. So we, whatever the object will receive from the client, it will available in argument property inside the product property, and that object will map with this product object. So as we are using TypeScript, so it will tightly typed with that. Why there is a warning? Not all code return path. Oh, there is not written. Now what I'll do is I'll show event dot argument. Is it argument or arguments? Product data. So we are not doing something, we are just printing the product, and I'll just return the name so we can find out that it's really coming to the server and we are doing something. Event dot arguments dot product dot name. Now what we have done is we have created a mutation in schema. This mutation takes an input as an object which has two properties. Then we created a resolver in our stack, lambda is resolver, and we have mentioned mutation, type is mutation, and field name is add product. Then inside a lambda we need to handle that mutation. So for handling this we have implemented this way. Let's go and run it. Deploy. There is another property called X-ray enabled. X-ray is a what you call it's in a, like an X-ray. It gives a complete inside detail of your request. So there is a quite well details available. Otherwise, if you do not enable X-ray, you will see the logs, but that's a log. X-ray will give you complete stats, what you receive, what you have returned, and everything. So I'll show you that as well. So meanwhile it's loading. When you are on your function, what you can do is there is a third tab called monitoring. If you enable the X-ray, then there will be a detail inside the X-ray as well. At this moment, we have not enabled the X-ray, but you can see the logs on CloudWatch by clicking this CloudWatch or by clicking here on a log stream. So you can see the logs of your function. You can see the logs are available here. As you can see, whenever we call a function, it gives us the stats. So it took 0.9 ms build duration, and it took the 128 memory. So it gives you all the detail. And at this moment, I have also output the console. So console will also appear here. Okay, so it's done now, and I'll go to the AWS AppSync interface, refresh it. Now you can see there is another option, mutation. Previously there was no something mutation. Now we have created this mutation. So click on the mutation, press plus. It will show you the mutation. Click on the checkbox on the add product, name and price. Select all those. Now you can see it has created the query for. You're saying something? Valis, you're saying something? Okay, I guess his voice is cut off. So once he's back, I'll ask him what he was saying. So at this moment, the mutation, my mutation, and it has given us in direct how you can call it. So it's add product. There's a object, colon name, and let's say I'll name it T-shirt. And when I'll press plus button, it will asking you want to run query or mutation. I said mutation. So it runs this mutation. The request sent to the lambda function entertained that function, and then it returns us a response called product data T-shirt. So let's go to the function, close the CloudWatch. Okay, so we are in monitoring at this moment as well. Log 5528, so it's older log. Let's go for the CloudWatch. Okay, so now you can see here, these are the logs, and you can see this one, event data name T-shirt price. This is what I have printed in console in my lambda function. So we can identify that, yeah, it's working. If there is something we need to output on the console, so we can verify from here, as well as if, as we have seen here, it is returning a proper result. So that means our function is working. What we can do is in the what you say Postman, we can also call this like, let's say mutation, my mutation. It's quite a smaller size in the view, so I don't know if I can increase zoom in. Yes, I can increase the size, zoom in. Okay, so creating mutation, and it will be exactly like this. And then I'll say product. Let me copy this. What I wanted to show the difference is we can create a global variable. I mean GraphQL variable, not a global variable. So if we are calling with this one, it will receive the data just we received previously. So you can see our product, the data as a T-shirt. But we have learned when we were working with the GraphQL, we have seen while we were working with the Shopify GraphQL, we want to send the data. So we need to create a query, how we need to pass the data. So for that, what I can do is we can create a round bracket over here, and I'll say dollar. product name, call it a string, dollar, product price, call it an int, and then instead of providing value here directly, I'll name it dollar product name, and in price I'll say dollar product price. Okay, so now what we can do is inside this GraphQL variable we'll pass, so you can exactly map how we will be calling your query from the client side. So that's in that case you can manage this way. I'll say product name, issue, okay, you need to provide it's in double quote. Let's say. Okay, so now what you can do is send query, and you can see, zoom out a bit, you can see product data formal shoe. So the query went well. We can see these logs here in the CloudWatch. So there's a refresh button. So you can see formal shoe, event data formal shoe name, and price is missing. So the okay, it's not price, it's a product price. Okay, now you can see formal shoe and price. So your logs is working, your sync API is working. We have seen how we will be initiating the GraphQL AppSync, GraphQL API with AppSync, and we are saying that we will be accessing with the API key. We have created the Lambda function, so stack for our Lambda function. Then we map this Lambda function with the GraphQL AppSync GraphQL. So that's how you do API.lambda. Then you create a resolver, and that's our schema. And inside this welcome our Lambda function, we'll managing this in this way. From the perspective of AppSync, this is the major part. If you try to understand how AppSync will be working, there are more things. I'll have to show you one more thing, how we'll be returning object from the mutation. So I'll show you, but overall these are the beasts. And once you are done with this, you know how AppSync works, how you create a GraphQL, how you map with any data source. At this moment we have shown Lambda. Maybe in the next class we'll go for the DynamoDB and all other stuff. So that's the basic thing. What I'll need to do is just one thing. I need to show you that instead of returning a string, so at this moment our mutation is returning string. What I wanted to return a product. So that's a separate object. So I need to create a type. Name string, price. At this moment there is no difference between these two, but we'll keep it different. Product, that's our schema. We don't have to change anything over here. What we need to do is we need to change the return type. We need to return an object. So what I'll do is I'll just do nothing but return the event dot argument dot product. Just return the object. To understand that how we can display this query, there is nothing else. So I have done this. It will return an object. You can return an object from here as well, query as well. So there is no big deal. So CloudWatch is itself another service which is for managing logs. So for all your, if your Lambda function, your API gateway, so all the logs managing over here. So the another service means it will be definitely be charging additionally. So you need to see how much portion of a CloudWatch is free, and then you can work with it. But as you can see, we have used CloudWatch, AppSync, Lambda, these four services together in today's section. So there are all these services are available, but you can easily combine them and use them. So these are the few 10-20 services we might be using in our case of serverless learning. Okay, so it's working now. Let's go for the okay. So now you can see this mutation is showing us product which is for input, and also it's showing a name and price that will be returning from the server. So name and price. So you need to understand how you need to create this query. So the add product, after that curly bracket, and you are asking for these two properties. So let's say if I am calling this, it will return me t-shirt and price 10. I don't want a name, I want only a price as a return. So it will just return me a price. So that's how you can manage this. If we go for the, it will give us an error because it's saying sub selection is required. So you need to provide sub selection. Sub selection is called like this. So I'll say price. Now you can see add product returns price, because I just asked for the price, and if I ask for the name as well, it will return me the name and price both. So that's how the AppSync works, and how we'll be managing it, and we'll be adding more things to it. But on the face of it, at the major level, these are the basic styles or the properties or functionalities how you will be creating the GraphQL against your any data source. I guess we do not have time, otherwise we had to go to the DynamoDB. Varis, you want to add anything? And you were saying, okay, so Varis, are you there? Okay, I guess Varis is not there. So at the end, creating a AppSync service for the GraphQL, then connecting it with the Lambda function, and then we're creating the resolver. And we are not specifically creating resolver inside the Lambda function. That's the benefit of it. And then you can create all these things as I've shown you. So the important part is you need to understand GraphQL first. We have done all these things in previous classes. So one is the part is GraphQL, and another important thing is how you will be working with the AppSync. So GraphQL is an independent language provided by the Facebook, what AWS did is created service for it, so that you can manage it easily. So that's the more important for us. Yes, Waris, are you there? Okay, then we'll wind up over here, and we'll see you in next class. Bye, everyone.